What if you could literally rewire your brain to beat defeat and build a life that's actually full of joy? Now I know it sounds like a modern self-help ad, but this promise was made way back in 1952 by Norman Vincent Peale. His book, The Power of Positive Thinking, was a massive deal. It sold over 15 million copies. So, what was his secret? Let's dive in and break down the core ideas that made this book an absolute classic. So, let's start with a feeling I think we all know way too well. Do you ever just feel totally beaten down by everyday life? Like you're just pushing a giant rock uphill, trying to get through the day, and you're just convinced that you've got it rough. Well, that's the exact feeling, that universal struggle that Peale taps into from page 1. And his answer to that struggle? Whoa, it is incredibly bold. He just comes right out and says, you do not need to be defeated by anything. Your life can be full of joy and satisfaction. And look, this wasn't just some fluffy feel-good talk. Peale was absolutely convinced that he had figured out a practical, repeatable system to get peace of mind, better health, and a constant flow of energy. Okay, so let's get into the book's big idea, what he called a promise of power. And it's so important to get this. This isn't about wishful thinking or just hoping good things happen. Nope, he lays it all out as a practical system that's designed to give you real power over your life. And what's so great is just how direct he is about it. The whole point of the book isn't some deep philosophical debate. It's simple, to help you get a happy, satisfying, and worthwhile life. He basically frames it as a how-to guide, teaching what he calls applied Christianity, using the core ideas of faith as actual tools to build the life you want, with what he describes as God's help. All right, so if this system promises all this power, what's the first big thing we have to get past? Well, according to Peale, it all starts with what he calls the crisis of confidence. This is the #1 problem he thinks is holding almost everybody back. He gives it a name, the inferiority complex. He says it's this deep, gnawing self-doubt that just messes with our hopes and dreams. And this is not some rare thing. Peale points to a university survey where, get this, a staggering 75% of students said a lack of confidence was their single biggest problem. 75%! And you can see here exactly where that self-doubt comes from. Peale says it often starts way back in our past. Things that happen to us as kids, or constantly being compared to someone else, or even just our own emotional baggage we carry around. All these things plant the seeds for that little voice in our head that says, you're not good enough. So, if those feelings of insecurity run that deep, how in the world do you fight back? Peale's game plan starts with one single powerful command: believe in yourself. And that's not just a nice saying. For him, it is the absolute foundation of personal power. And here it is. This is the key. He writes that the greatest secret to getting rid of that inferiority complex is to fill your mind to overflowing with faith. The idea is that by building up this huge faith in God, you, in turn, build a real, solid faith in yourself. To really show how this works, Peale tells this great story about a traveling salesman who was, in his own words, haunted by insecurities and just saturated with inferiority. I mean, this guy's whole life and career were being totally wrecked by his own negative thinking. So what did he do? He came up with this simple, but honestly, brilliant plan to just reprogram his own brain. He literally surrounded himself with positivity. He took these little cards with powerful Bible verses and clipped them all over his car's dashboard. And while he was driving around all day, he'd just say them out loud, over and over and over. And check it out, these weren't just random verses. They were like targeted mental ammunition, all designed to build confidence. Just imagine repeating stuff like, if God be for us, who can be against us? Or, I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me, all day long. He was basically flooding his mind with these messages of strength. And by doing that, he started to literally force out all those old destructive thoughts of doubt. So this whole idea of actively taking control of your thoughts is a huge theme for Peale. Beyond just affirmations, what other tools does he give us? Let's take a look at his toolkit for your mind, a bunch of really practical ways to find some inner peace. One of Peale's biggest methods is something he calls mind emptying, and you can think of it like a mental detox. He actually suggests that at least twice a day you stop and consciously, actively push out all the junk, all the fears, the anger, the insecurities, the guilt, all the stuff that just clutters up your mind. And this slide just lays it out so clearly, right? It's the choice we all have. Is your mind going to be an earful of trouble, just soaking up all the fear, worry, and hate? Or is it going to be a mind full of peace, that you deliberately fill with good stuff like serenity and faith. Peele's point is super simple. One of those paths drains you, and the other one actually builds you up. Okay, so this whole idea of deliberately filling your mind with good stuff leads us to one of Peele's most interesting and, maybe even a little controversial ideas. He calls it the science of prayer. He doesn't just talk about it as a religious thing, but as a practical, almost scientific formula for getting real results in your life. He boils it all down to this really memorable 3-step formula. First, prayerize, which just means talk with God simply and directly all day long, like a partner. Second, pictureize. Create this super vivid mental image of what you want and see it like it's already real. And third, actualize. You hand that picture over to God's will, you work your tail off, and you watch as that image starts to become reality. Now, if there is one single idea that pulls all of these different techniques together, it's this one. Peale uses this powerful quote from a famous psychiatrist, Dr. Carl Menninger, and it really becomes the heart of his whole philosophy. Attitudes are more important than facts. So what does that actually mean? It means that any fact in your life, a tough job, a difficult relationship, some personal weakness, that's not the final story. Your attitude about that fact is where the real power is. It can be the very thing that beats you, or it can be the force that helps you do something amazing. So the question Peale really leaves us with is this. What fact in your life right now is just waiting to be totally transformed by your attitude?